We seem to be heading to war with Iran. Certainly the Biden administration is pushing us in that direction. What's new and interesting and ominous is that very few Republicans, the opposition party, are pushing back. Instead, some of the party's leaders are encouraging it. Here, for example, is Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina from last weekend on NBC.
You said this week that the only way to keep the war from escalating is to hold Iran accountable, part of what you're talking about now, and that it might mean bombing their oil refineries. Have you had any discussions with the Biden administration about this?
A bit. Here's my message. If Hezbollah, which is a proxy of Iran, launches a massive attack on Israel, I will consider that a threat to the state of Israel, existential in nature. I will introduce a resolution in the United States Senate to allow military action by the United States in conjunction with Israel to knock Iran out of the oil business. Iran, if you escalate this war, we're coming for you.
Are you effectively poised to declare war on Iran? That's very strong language.
I am poised to use military force to destroy the source of funding for Hamas and Hezbollah.
No, that's Lindsey Graham. Few others in the Republican Party will be that open about their intentions, but very few disagree with him. Certainly not in private. They agree. So what would war with Iran mean? Well, it's hard to know because virtually no one who's talking about it in public is operating from a deep interest in America's interest. Is this good for us or is it not? Former Colonel Douglas Macgregor is the CEO of Our Country, Our Choice, and one of the first people we turn to for analysis of events like this because he is interested in what happens to the United States. He joins us now. Doug, thank you for coming on. Do you think that we are moving toward war with Iran?
Yes, I do. And it looks like the chosen destination is indeed Armageddon. There doesn't seem to be any real appreciation for the implications for us and frankly for Europe and the world, as well as the Middle East, of such action. You know, take for an example, just on the economic side, about 20% of the world's oil passes through the Straits of Hormuz every month. Probably 25% of liquefied natural gas. And you're talking about shutting down 2 to 3 million barrels a day of oil from Iran. This entire region is involved in the war. This is not an Iranian monopoly by any stretch of the imagination. But the point is that when we're looking at 10-year Treasury yields up over 5%, and people are increasingly convinced that the Fed has lost control, the economic side of the house is catastrophe. Then when you look at the military side, you have to look at the arsenal of missiles that Iran possesses. And they can reach out 1,200 miles with great precision, very high explosive conventional warheads that would do enormous damage, destroying whole city blocks in places like Haifa, Tel Aviv, even Jerusalem, though I doubt they would attack Jerusalem. The bottom line is that we need to think this through, and everyone right now is emoting. There is no thinking anywhere, as far as I can tell.
What would happen to the United States if we followed Senator Graham's advice and just began bombing critical infrastructure in Iran? What would happen then?
Well, all of the bases that we have in Iraq and Syria, unfortunately, where we still have over 1,000 Americans, all of those would be targeted, and this time they would target them accurately, and this destruction would be wholesale. I would expect trouble here at home and in the United States because of the open border. Hezbollah has a very large operation in Mexico. There are no doubt many Hezbollah agents inside the United States. We can only begin to imagine the kind of trouble they could cause. The missile and space program in Iran is very advanced, as is their cyber warfare capability. All of these things would be brought to bear against us. But what's most important, I think, for Americans to understand is if we attack Iran on the basis of Hezbollah's alleged willingness to attack Israel if Israel invades Gaza, we will end up in a fight with Russia.
Escalating Mideast tensions not only prompted that rare global travel alert from the State Department, federal law enforcement officials are also warning of potential threats right here in the U.S. We get the details from CBS's Catherine Herridge.
With emotions running high at protests across the country, in New York City to Chicago and Washington, D.C., A new federal law enforcement bulletin obtained by CBS News warns individuals or so-called lone offenders inspired by or reacting to the ongoing Israel-Hamas conflict pose the most likely threat to Americans.
There has been a significant increase in reported threats all across the country.
Attorney General Merrick Garland saying today the increased threats target Jewish, Muslim, and Arab communities. The intelligence bulletin details reports of physical assaults, bomb threats, and online calls for mass casualty attacks. With metal barricades again securing the U.S. Capitol and armed security at places of worship, a separate alert from New York City police identifies an uptick in violent neo-Nazi messaging online and finds foreign terrorists like al-Qaeda are calling on followers to attack Americans and Western Europeans.
Current threat environment is dynamic and complex.
Javed Ali is a former counterterrorism official.
Can Homeland Security stop the violence from coming here?
Homeland Security is in an excellent position to try and prevent any foreign-directed threat from entering the United States, but unfortunately, you can never have 100% security in these kind of moments.
Well, there's no specific or credible threat here at home. Multiple officials described the situation to CBS News as evolving, with law enforcement on standby, ready to respond. Nora.
Catherine Herridge, thank you very much.
U.S. banks are closing a large number of branches right now, another ominous sign of the financial meltdown that has started to unfold. They are also laying off workers by the thousands in preparation for the chaos that is ahead, according to new reports. Record high interest rates and turmoil in the real estate industry are adding an enormous amount of pressure on the nation's biggest financial institutions. Even big names like JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, and Goldman Sachs have reported major losses in recent months, and they know a much bigger crisis is approaching. That's why banks are getting very tight with their money, reducing their brick-and-mortar footprint and slashing their headcounts as they fear mass withdrawals and more failures could happen in the coming winter. Experts say these are the very early stages of another global financial crisis, and many fully expect conditions to get even worse from now on. In the first 7 days of October, banks closed a whopping 54 branches, leaving an increasing number of Americans without access to basic financial services. Bank of America shuttered 21 branches in the first week of October, according to a bulletin published by the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, OCC, on Friday. Similarly, Wells Fargo eliminated 15 branches, while U.S. Bank and JP Morgan Chase reported closing 9 and 3 respectively. More recently, Santander and Citibank closed nearly 20 branches each. Bank executives say financial institutions have started investing more in their online platforms, where they expect consumers to handle more of their banking transactions. For that reason, they're continuously trimming their physical footprints, pushing some of the savings to their bottom lines and reinvesting the rest in evolving technology. However, some analysts argue that those decisions are also strategic. With fewer branches around, when another wave of bank runs occurs, only a limited amount of customers will have access to their local bank to try and take their money out of the system.